Hi everybody, this is Shannon from No Shelf Control. Thank you for joining me on the channel tonight. I recently had the opportunity to see and meet an author that I wasn't familiar with before last month, and I wanted to tell you all about it. His name is Matthew Desmond. He is the author of Evicted, which I am familiar with but have not read cover to cover yet. It is a book about housing insecurity and poverty in the United States, and it is a Pulitzer Prize winning book. His latest book, which came out in March, is called Poverty by America, and it is a hard look at why poverty is so rampant in this country as compared to other countries around the world. And you know, what the factors are that go into that and what we can potentially do about it. I want to tell you a little bit about the book and read you the synopsis, but then I'd love to tell you what I learned from Matthew when I saw him speak and what I thought about the book overall. So let's get started. This one is published by Crown. It is 304 pages and it was published March 21st of 2023. Now, I said that it was 304 pages. About 100 of those pages are notes, bibliography, references at the end. About 189 of the pages are the real heart of what Matthew Desmond has to say. And it reads like a pretty long op-ed piece, but it is fantastic. And I want to tell you a lot more about it. So here's the synopsis. The Pulitzer Prize winning best-selling author of Evicted reimagines the debate on poverty, making a new and bracing argument about why it persists in America, because the rest of us benefit from it. One of the most anticipated books of 2023, from the Washington Post, Time, Esquire, Newsweek, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, Elle, Salon, LitHub, and Kirkus Reviews. The United States, the richest country on earth, has more poverty than any other advanced democracy. Why? Why does this land of plenty allow 1 in every 8 of its children to go without basic necessities, permit scores of its citizens to live and die on the streets, and authorize its corporations to pay poverty wages? In this landmark book, acclaimed sociologist Matthew Desmond draws on history, research, and original reporting to show how affluent Americans knowingly and unknowingly keep poor people poor. Those of us who are financially secure exploit the poor, driving down their wages while forcing them to overpay for housing and access to cash and credit. We prioritize the subsidization of our wealth over the alleviation of poverty, designing a welfare state that gives the most to those who need the least. And we stockpile opportunity in exclusive communities, creating zones of concentrated riches alongside those of concentrated despair. Some lives are made small so that others may grow. Elegantly written and fiercely argued, this compassionate book gives us new ways of thinking about a morally urgent problem. It also helps us imagine solutions. Desmond builds a startlingly original and ambitious case for ending poverty. He calls on us all to become poverty abolitionists, engaged in a politics of collective belonging, to usher in a new age of shared prosperity and at last true freedom. So this book really hit me where I live. You know from having watched many of my videos where I fall politically, and I am, of course, the audience for this book. If you're not willing to look at your part in what causes and continues poverty in the United States, you're never going to pick this book up. So you have to have a certain kind of mindset to even be interested in this book. And it is one that I subscribe to. I will also say that Matthew is taking no prisoners in this book. He points the finger directly at each and every one of us. When the synopsis says, making a new and bracing argument about why poverty persists in America, because the rest of us benefit from it, that's no joke. That is what Matthew Desmond is going for here in this book. And I felt that strongly. He first makes the case that poverty is disproportionate in the United States, and he gives you the facts and statistics to prove that. As compared to the rest of the world, 1 in 8 of our children are in poverty, and that number is much bigger than it should be. So he gives you all of the facts and figures you need, the backstory to understand that poverty is out of control in the United States. Then he talks a bit about why and gives a lot of rationale and reasoning for what the things are that happen in our country that are different than things that happen in other countries that cause this kind of disparity between those who have and those who don't have. When the Gramercy Bookstore brought Matthew Desmond to Columbus, Ohio, and I got to hear him speak, I heard him talk a lot about absolving. He talks a lot about the fact that we make arguments that allow us to determine that we personally are not part of this problem. I didn't make the government programs. I may benefit from things, but, I'm not the one who makes these rules. I'm not the 1%. I'm a typical middle class American. What can I do about this? And he does not allow for that in this book. It is a scathing argument against absolving yourself from the poverty that exists in the United States. And it was a welcomed scathing argument for me. I am more than willing to look at myself and the things that I do and to be pointed to things that I should be considering and things that I can do differently that would impact poverty in this country. I do think that I suffer from the same disorder that many of us suffer from in saying, well, I'm not doing it. I'm not keeping things, I vote for welfare programs. I'm a Democrat. You can't blame me. I'm progressive. But Matthew goes through a lot of what exists in his book very carefully with pointed stories and with facts and historical documentation that helps to make the case that there are things we can do, that this problem has not always existed to this extent in the United States, and that there are absolutely accommodations that we can make that would change it. Basically, his question is, why do we have so much and such deep poverty in the United States when we have so much wealth? How is it possible that those two things exist together? He talks about the fact that spending on government programs is not the answer, that while we do spend a lot on government programs and welfare type of programs, it doesn't change the underlying systems that keep poor people poor. We have gone from being a country that supports unions to a country that has really disenfranchised unions. And unions were a big factor in allowing workers to protect their wages and to not be taken advantage of by big companies. We don't have that to the degree that we had it before. I grew up in a union family. My dad has worked for the phone company his entire life until he retired. And so I learned a little bit about unions and strikes and things when I was growing up. And I know that there is power in unionization that, has been siphoned off as we have allowed those unions to fall out of power as time has gone on. Big corporations get away with not paying a living wage because they know that workers can depend on government aid, like the Earned Income Tax Credit. And so that becomes more of a benefit to the corporation than it does to the person who's actually receiving it, because corporations can depress wages knowing that, their employees will receive that Earned Income Tax Credit from the government. There are all kinds of these things. He talks about housing and the fact that landlords get very similar rent on very small and impoverished properties that they do on, middle range properties, and therefore make a lot more on sort of the smaller, less desirable places because people have to pay rent on those kinds of places in order to survive. And he points out that as, middle and high income folks in society, we get more benefits from the government than impoverished people ever do. He also talks about something that I found really fascinating, and that is that we have laws in place to make sure that you are not discriminated against based on your gender, your race, your sexuality, and whether it happens or not, there is legal recourse for that kind of discrimination. And I know it does still happen. But we don't have any laws in place that prevent anyone from discriminating against someone for lack of wealth. We can discriminate against you based on how you look, how you smell, what you wear, what you have, and we do. And that was a thought that was just like, oh, wow. I get that. I get that we allow people to be in these situations of poverty, and then we discriminate against them for jobs or for benefits or for help or for housing, the things that they need. It's perfectly acceptable to discriminate against people for being poor. And I just, that really opened my eyes to one degree or another. I also don't want you to think that Matthew Desmond just points out the problems. He does also talk about solutions. He talks about high density housing and the fact that many of us in middle America, who are middle class, are against having high density housing in our neighborhoods. That's got to change if we want to be able to have places where people who cannot afford as much benefit from the resources that those of us who can afford more have at our beck and call. We need to make these people part of our neighborhoods. And that's one of those things I can't continue to talk about not wanting poverty in the United States and then say, but not in my backyard. And I thought that indictment was fair. I also think investment in the stock market. So if you're invested in the stock market, this is one of the cases that Matthew Desmond makes. You are part of the problem in that when companies attempt to raise their workers' wage, we tend to bail on their stocks. Their stock prices plummet and they lose money because we don't see it as a way to keep value in the corporation. And we don't value giving money to the employees. So those couple of things were interesting to me and definitely got my attention. And he talks about a number of other situations that are very much that way. Things that I really have to change my mindset about in how I am voting, in how I am voting with my dollars, if I want to make an impact on poverty in this country. He also talks about broadening and empowering the IRS, which I thought was an interesting point to make. He talks about the fact that wealthy people who cheat on their taxes often get away with it, and that there is a huge financial benefit to the country that could be distributed to impoverished people in taxes that are not currently being collected, and that we need to empower the IRS to be able to do its job. Also talked about the fact that we don't always celebrate our successes. Rental assistance programs were huge during the pandemic and very, very successful, but you hear nothing about it. And so how are politicians supposed to know that we care about that we value that we, see that success and support them in continuing to do work like that if we don't talk about it? So these are the kinds of things that Matthew Desmond goes through. And it was riveting reading. About 189 pages that reads like an opinion piece with a lot of facts backing him up, a lot of true life stories of people he met, when he was living amongst people who were struggling with poverty. So those anecdotes help a lot in giving color to the situation and helping me to understand, exactly what the problem is and what it looks like. How do I recognize it? Unless I hear stories of people who are actually dealing with it in their lives. Matthew Desmond was an interesting speaker. So he's coming from the perspective that we all have a part in this, and he's indicting. He's saying you cannot absolve yourself if you live in this country from some level of blame for the poverty that exists here. But he also comes off as a little bit apologetic. He's a soft-spoken guy. He talks about not absolving ourselves, but he sort of looks like a guy who knows you're gonna yell at him. So, there was this part of him that I thought, interesting. He knows people aren't going to like this message. And he's a little bit, like, okay, I know that what I'm saying isn't going to be terribly popular. And I apologize for it, but it's the truth. You need to hear this. And if you want this to change, you have to do something about it. So some of the criticisms that I read in reviews of the book after I finished it were, of course, from people who have a different political bent, who would swear that all of this is socialism, that, he's just walking the path to Marxism. And he has received that criticism a lot. Other criticisms are that it is an op-ed, that it really is 189 pages of Matthew Desmond's opinion. But I think it's a very well-informed, well-researched opinion. So that did not offend me at all. Apparently, Evicted may have been more statistical, a little bit more research and fact-based. And so some folks who came into reading Poverty by America may have had a different set of expectations for what they were getting into. Having not read Evicted, I didn't have expectations. I had just heard Matthew speak and knew that, he was not going to absolve me of blame for the poverty that exists in this country. So I think it's a great book. It's a quick read. 189 pages is nothing, and then lots of notes and research to support it. I highly recommend that if you have any interest in social causes, in eliminating poverty in this country, in understanding poverty in this country, that you give this one a read. It is definitely worth your time. I hope that you have enjoyed this review. I try not to get too political, usually, but I thought that this book was well worth sticking my neck out a little bit and letting my political biases be seen. I think that Matthew Desmond is saying that none of us are off the hook, and therefore, I don't think this is a book just for liberals or just for conservatives. I think this is a book for all of us, and I think there's something that each of us can take away that we can change about how we do things that might have an impact. So if you enjoyed this review, please click like and subscribe. It helps me to know what you enjoy so that I can do more videos like that. I do have a wish list at the bottom of each of my video descriptions. If you would like to gift me with a book from that list, bookshop.org will send it directly to me. I will read it, review it on the channel, and give you a big shout out and thank you. I have a lot more videos coming up. I have more single book reviews. I have more lists of new books that are coming out on Tuesdays that I am excited about. And I have a few other surprises. At the beginning of the month, we'll do the Book of the Month books, the Aardvark Box books, and the monthly reading challenge that I've been doing month over month. So that is all coming up soon. I hope you will stick around to hear about it, and we can talk all things bookish again shortly. Take care. Bye.